Ladies and gentlemen, a power and renewable energy professional with 20 plus years of experience all around experience in the field of power, renewable energy, sustainability, development, and infrastructure sector, had an insight of South and South Asia region for identifying emerging business and market trends, launching new ventures, creating market presence, and capturing market share and achieving growth. Now, working on the unique concept of behavior change that will lead to energy efficiency, energy awareness, and to make more energy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Sabyasachi Pattanaik, Director, Opower, Oracle Energy and Water, Oracle.
Thank you, MC. And it's an honor to be here. And thanks for giving me this opportunity and the podium to talk about what we do in Oracle Energy and Water. The division which I represent is the Opower, which is kind of, a part of Oracle Energy and Water. Looks after predominantly focusing on DSM, customer analytics. So today, with the smart meters being the heart of the topic and the discussion across the power sector, which I would like to kind of, try to touch upon the segment which isn't isn't much talked about, but has a lot of importance. While we are mentioning about the deployment, the technicalities of the smart meters, but what we have to understand and create that importance, that the end consumer, where the meter is going to be hosted, and the data, how it can be best utilized for the consumer to whom we are catering to. Opower, I will talk about more on this. So let's kind of, let's dig into. So this is few credentials which might sound a bit pompous, a bit bragging, but yes, I am proud to talk about these achievements, which kind of, which you can see on the screen. But, the takeaway in this particular slide is we are the technology company, Oracle Energy and Water, which used to be Oracle Utilities, which invest the maximum, under the R&D. So that's like $90 million annually. We use it for innovations, for solutions and offerings. So now, as I talked about Opower, so what Opower does, Oracle Energy and Water division has a unit, Opower, which is predominantly works on energy efficiency, demand flexibility, demand side management. And we have been catering to more than 175 utilities globally. We have, I can kind of, the major takeaway which you need to see from here is the 2.5 trillion meter reads. What it signifies would kind of, my future slides will talk about, but this is one of the feat which would kind of, gives us that insight for the consumer, for the utility, how it best can be used. And of course, there are more than 3,300 programs which we have delivered to the utilities. We work, so a little bit deep down what Oracle has been doing, has done. So we have kind of, served and reached out to 6 crores houses and businesses worldwide. We have kind of, as I have already talked about, the 2.5 trillion or 2.5 lakh crores meter read and analysis, which we are doing. And we have sent 100 crores of communication, more than 100 crores of communication to the consumers through the utilities. And, on the savings part, through these initiatives.
The double layer where the IOs are there. Who is asking, yeah?
MC, if we can mute others who, so that
it's done, sir. It's done.
Thank you so much. So I was talking about the savings which we have done, which we have achieved is 31 terawatt hours, 31,000 million units, which is kind of, from running these programs, behavioral energy efficiency. And what we are expertise is the behavioral science, big data analytics, and user-centric, software design, which helps the user through the utility to understand the smart meters, the data, how they can best utilize, which can be a win-win situation for both the utility and the consumers. So Opower works as of date. We kind of, in India, we work only with the residential segment, while in US we have our CNI segment, but in India as of date, we work only for the residential segment, residential consumer through the utility. So that's kind of, a bit of, so Guidehouse Insights, which is a third party, research analyst firm, has rated us as Oracle Opower as the best smart meter analytics for the solution serving domestic customers, as I have told what we are doing, and then best home energy management solutions for the domestic consumer. So this is few credentials, few background, how we have been doing, what we have been doing, and now deep downing, onto the topics that what we have come together today is, it is a prediction by the Wood Mackenzie. It's a 2020. It might have changed a bit, but this is its predictions and forecast says that this kind of, there would be 1.3 billion smart meters worldwide by 2025 deployed. And what we are going to do with the data is the main question. So like, as they say, the data would be the next oil, would kind of, shouldn't be unheard of, kind of, we shouldn't ignore that fact. So that's is with that, I'll deep down on Opower solutions. So what from the smart meters when it is deployed at the consumer level, what a utility looks after. So there are three things which can generally the utility looks after is the customer benefits, the financial benefits for the utility, and the operational benefits for the utility, like maybe how we can detect theft or faulty devices, how we can kind of engage the consumers, how we can peak measure the loads which we have been doing, and other programs which can be associated and rolled. So this is what kind of the AMI, generally these are the three things. So now comes what Opower does. So Opower is this customer-centric AMI strategy which we follow. This is kind of where we bring on the behavioral science along with the artificial intelligence from the software which we have, and what we do is the data which the utility provides us. We kind of devise a program. We reach out to the through communication to the customer, which kind of is totally hyper personalized for the consumers to take on actions. And the way we operate, it is a scaled operation. So it is like through whole of the utility of the residential consumers can be reach out. And the best part is that it can kind of multiply and triplicate the benefits across the utilities. And this is the strategy which any of the utility should be following to maximize the data, consumer data which we have, to grid stabilize, to reach out to the consumers, and make them aware of what smart meter. I was listening to the last last session, and that's where I have been hearing questions that what else kind of to be done. So the consumer is where needs to be taken on board. They can be, as they are into consumer becoming prosumers, they can be a partner to the utility in enrolling these kind of programs, successfully implementing, until unless consumers are aware of smart meter and what is the benefits of that, how they can leverage these data for their benefits and for the utilities benefit, then it would be a half-hearted approach, and it would not be a kind of win-win situation. I would also share some case studies which will talk about how the things which has been planned didn't go as per the plan because of non-involvement of the consumer. So that's kind of the customer-centric. So what we do, I mean, this is what we generally we do. So why we have to influence the consumer actions, like why we need, and the first case it is in influencing the action, the consumers, or bringing into the actions. So because I mean, very unfortunate within the energy world, but we have to face that. Since what we have seen is the electricity, the user or the consumer didn't feel importance, like that energy usage is really a factor which he or she needs to be bothered about, like and one of the studies of Accenture talks about a human kind of, a individual thinks around 9 minutes on an average about their energy usage in the whole year. So 9 minutes is the span which we have. So, there are a couple of things which we can do within this 9 minutes. Either we can increase the 9 minutes to a bigger duration, or effectively use these 9 minutes. That's where the challenge is. And the smart meter data, which, as we know, in every 15 minutes or 30 minutes, it's pretty complex. So to represent the consumer, that's where we specializes. We have pioneered that. Opower was the first to bring behavioral science in the energy field to study the human behavior and call for action, call to action for the consumers. So this is where we specialize, we do the best. So what we do is kind of, we have, as I talked about, 2.5 trillion meter reads, which we have. We synthesize, we analyze those data, and we send across the communication which is relevant, which can be catchy, which can be really be pertinent to the consumer, which we are being sending. Hyper personalization, which I meant. So generally, a human mind is pretty complex. They generally takes out the shortcut, which is to our surprise, which is the best option, by choice, which the human mind takes. But with that, that's where we come in picture, saying, giving the simplified communication to the human mind through our communications, where we simplify the complexity and predict and offer each consumer needs what they are looking into. So that is what the artificial intelligence and machine algorithm, which we work on, is based out of. And what we do is we run, our behavioral scientist runs few principles, which is acknowledged, kind of, and proven, that these kind of communication, the way we communicate with the consumers, really are effective, and which ultimately leads to action from the consumer. So once we are able to change the behavior, or kind of, create an impact, whether it is little, that's fine. But if we can, then that is an imprint within the human mind to keep on repeating that. To have that behavioral change is the most challenging thing. But then after what it is done, then it is kind of, it's a kind of, run of the mill, which is the individual keeps on doing it. The first is, as they say, that, to have a practice in the first 21 days is the toughest to have a kind of, to put into the practice, to have a regime, a regular kind of become a habit. So that is what kind of, I would say, is what we are specialized, which we do. So we do with these data, which we do large experiments with our scientists, and we communicate. And the communication is not generic, it is personalized, as I said, but also localized in terms of within the locality, within the state, within the country. Also there are a different kind of communications which is being sent. I would show in my future slides how it is, just to create and give an example. For Japan, Japan, they love cartoon characters. So the communication what we do in Japan is more cartoon centric. We represent the energy analysis, the energy usage, the energy savings through our cartoons, how we do. So this is how we do localization. Here there is some language which we have chosen. In it is not pure Hindi, which is really difficult, or pure English, which might not be kind of acceptable to all. Maybe a mix of Hindi and English, which we call it as English. So these are the kind of localization which we work on. And so going further, so it's kind of what we do is, through these we are trying to have with the smart meters, kind of it's a journey for the consumer when it starts. So we have a 3-step approach toward the engagement, customer engagement. First, we try to kind of make them aware with the experience, with a welcome letter, which I'll run you through that. Then second would be more kind of stepwise scaled adoption to new programs, adoption to new behavior, promotions or disaggregations, promotion of solar rooftops. That is kind of the third would be automation, which is predominantly leads to the digitization. Digitalization is one of the major themes which we are thinking would work wonders through the smart meters. And this is the step. You can't jump into step 3 from step 1. It has to be gradual. The consumer needs to be aware of what the smart meter data would do for him, and the utility needs to kind of to educate, help them educate that. That is how these are the 3-step approach which we take. And then, so as I talked about these 3 steps, I'll try to kind of give you a journey which is kind of will take you through how the things happens, how when we have the smart meter data and how we run it through the consumer. So let's say it's kind of a residential consumer who has been just kind of installed a smart meter, maybe in Delhi Development Authority, the kind of DDA quarters, DDA colony flat he stays. So generally a regular guy who works on a desktop or a mobile for usage. So what it happens when smart meter is installed is currently before the smart meters is installed, so they receive bills in print, kind of he kind of pays it through Paytm, Google Pay, or the kind of link. Then kind of if there is a complaint, then he has to kind of goes to the to his phone and complains. But what happens is what with the smart meter they integrated in his place, smart meters deployed. Then one day Suresh receives this kind of welcome letter, which talks about what it is, how it is different from the last communication, how he is performing vis-a-vis his neighbor, the social norms, and then how he is performing vis-a-vis. It is not always about the money. We need to understand that how we can save, but it is about where you stand. I mean, somebody feels pride if he is also capable of paying, but he can kind of have achieved and saved some units of electricity. And this kind of the report which you are seeing on your screen is also has an behavioral scientist input, how it has to be, how clean this needs to be, what all needs to be kind of what would be the color combination, what would be the kind of a bar graph represents as. So we don't want to flood it with a lot of information which the consumer is not able to kind of understand and accept. So that has to be a clean. So this is how we try to do. Underneath the welcome letter, we talk about how the billing period had been. So this is an energy insight the consumer needs to kind of gets. And of course, then there are certain steps, as I talked about, different programs which can be adopted and can be promoted. What is if the individual goes on a solar rooftop? So what are the benefits for adopting kind of going for a solar rooftop also is mentioned. And then there are a few FAQs. So this is the kind of communication to start with, that is how it goes. Then comes in a regular manner, this consumer gets home energy report, which we call it as you can see in the right kind of right hand corner. So we have named it as home energy report. So report means how he has been using it, how he has been performing vis-a-vis similar housings, and how it had been from month to month, how much he can save also, and where he stands in the society. So that is kind of one thing. So then there are tips where kind of he can there are tips how he can save on electricity, how he can save on, and in what way. That will kind of these are all the ways to call to action for the consumers. That is how we try to engage the consumer with. And then there is one through the mobile also, omni-channel communication which we do. So the consumer needs to, this is a pro bono activity. You don't have to go for it for compulsorily, but if the consumer goes for this analysis, divulge kind of disclosing what kind of ACs they have, what kind of cooling appliance or heating appliance they have, how old they are, what are the kind of ratings which they have. So the tips henceforth comes hyper personalization in terms of, let's say that we got to know that they have the cooling load of this particular residential consumer is more, then the tips would be more onto the cooling side. than that of any other things. So, and the tips also talks about the seasonality. We would not be talking about heating tips, in a summer, in summer months. So we would be more focused on the seasonality, how we can. So there are three kind of tips which we try to provide for the consumer, where one kind of tips which doesn't cost them at all, in terms of how they can seal the windows, how they can kind of how much distance they should maintain from the from the wall to the refrigerator for a better and effective cooling. The second type of savings which we provide is more with a very minimal cost in terms of overhauling, servicing of the appliances. The third comes a replacement to a better and smarter appliances. And this is where you can kind of, the same energy report can be used promoting, by the utility, promoting, equipment, any of the schemes, BLDC fans, or efficient air conditions, or air, refrigerator, which can be also part of it. So this is kind of, these are the insights which do. So when the analysis is out, so this is how the consumer can look into his load profile once he kind of, submit its consumption pattern, appliance pattern, and what way, this is how it looks like. Then that's how he would be getting to know that his or her load in the cooling is 75%, and then kind of appliance takes up 17%. So this gives an insight. Generally, if you see that there is an complaint from the consumer saying that, hey, the last month bill was much lesser than that of this bill, but what the consumer miss in this case, that there is a weather change which plays a very vital role. So this is what kind of this profile can shows that how he has performed, what would have been the kind of temperature, and how it had been the usage pattern for this particular consumer, how this has been from the previous bill. And if you can see, there is a tab which can be previous year also, the same month, previous year. That's how he or she can understand what it has been. So this is kind of the home reports which we talk about. I have talked about these. So as I started saying that how a few of the case studies I would kind of global case studies which I would try to kind of bring to you all is that when this is about Australia, state of Victoria, where the smart meter was planned to install, and they thought with the assumptions and with the participations of the consumer, they thought 75% of the consumers would kind of leverage and get benefited, and kind of and achievement would be what they have planned for. But what actually happened is that 2.5% expected value. It has kind of why? Because 1 in every 3 consumers didn't even understand the benefits of customer meters. Why a smart meters is beneficial to him or her. So that awareness, that journey, when I kind of I took you through this particular journey of this residential consumer, plays such an important role in the success of installing smart meters and getting the best out of for both utility and the consumer. So another very interesting case study which I can kind of bring to you is PG&E, which is a US based utility. When the president made the statement to us, they are one of our clients, saying that when they started rolling out smart meter, they thought it is an infrastructure project. So when they meant infrastructure project, what they meant is about just replacing from the old meters to the new meters, and that's all. It would be an easy task. But never ever they understood kind of they thought there would be a resistance from the consumers, and that become a customer project. So when they say customer project, in terms of how to convince the customer, how to relay the benefits of smart meters to the consumers, so that they have never thought of. So this is what kind of really is a game changer. It's a winning or a losing proposition for any of the project. So this is few other one of the this is about a utility in New Zealand, which is, as few of you might be knowing that New Zealand was the most competitive market, open market, where customer retention is the primary focus. And this is how it is when we send communications to our, through the utility send the communication to the consumer. This is how we look after what has resulted, I can very proudly share, is that 30% increase in relationship and brand metrics. I mean, there is a brand enhancement, there is a trust level, there is a more engaged customer, which is big through these things. And as I talked about, so there is 10% reduction in the churn rate, in terms of where the consumer used to 10% of the consumers who used to go away to other service provider had been retained. So that's the way of the power of the communications which has been. So all these benefits, if we talk about, and of course, when we are talking about a digital communication, the clicks matters, how many people really look into that. So there was a 51% of increase in the web traffic. So when the people started using it, now there is multiple avenue to view your whether it can be, not only can be laptop, but can be mobile, can be an iPad, I mean, then there can be a SMS through which you can, WhatsApp messages can be. So all these putting together at Mercury New Zealand, if we want to monetize it, the Mercury utility saved $1 million through these annually, through these interventions which they did for the consumer. So this is what in mobile interventions app, how it looks like, just for, it is an Opower thing. So now coming back to the customer side, I have talked about, I can very quickly go to Pacific. So what they have been doing, this was more of a, as I was talking about, more of a guiding consumer to go digital. And that's how the communication had resulted into 254,000 of clicks, which is and more on to what kind of intelligence to offer the bags, what can be done, what can't be done. It is peak load savings. So this was one of those case studies, which is I'm hurrying because I think I'm out of the time limit. So that's what I just trying to hurry. This is a case study. This is not a smart meter data, but this is a monthly meter data. But I wanted to let the audience know that we have been working with Indian utilities, and this is how we have. And the results, it is by a third party, which talks about the trust for the utility has gone up. The home energy report had been liked by these many peoples, and so this is what, and the cost to serve also has reduced, in terms of if the consumer is aware of through any sorts of intervention, digital communication, or through the mailers, so then the call volumes to the call center reduces, and that is it would be the main reason to reduce the cost to serve. That would be one thing which is say. So this is it's another, I mean, this was more on the demand response side, of which we run a behavioral demand response. And what we have achieved through this, pre-event, post-event, when it's when we know that there is a hot day coming, we send the communication a couple of days before the hot day, and then what we do is calculate post the event, and what we do is we try to engage with the customers, saying to sell off the load, not so critical loads to the off-peak hours. So that's and that's what we have saved certain things, which is which you can see through this. So now coming back, what we are offerings, what are the solutions of Oracle Opower with for mainly AMI and non-AMI, are home energy reports, web energy management, digital energy reports, AMI high bill alerts, or non-AMI high bill alerts as well, where the consumers are the way credit card or mobile operators operate. You get an alert if you set a ceiling of certain things. The consumer sets a ceiling, then they get an alert that, okay, fine, you have achieved to that ceiling, and now you need to be conscious about your consumption. So these are the alerts which we do. We do demand flexibility, peak time rebate program, DER, customer engagement program, and also rooftop promotions, like, how the consumers can be. So this is a omni-channel. So what we have been talking about is an omni-channel communication cornerstone to all the programs which would lead to, digitalization of the utility. So whether it is peak management, whether it is a home energy report or a high bill alerts. So these are the kind of channel which we can use, and it integrated with the with the utilities website. They need not to have another website to look into all these channels. So we have been and guide them to the next best access. So that's kind of so whatever I have been telling, what we have achieved so far through the big data analytics and machine learning and behavioral science and artificial intelligence is 31 terawatt hours energy efficiency saved, 415 to the tune of peak demand which we have saved through these kind of programs. And as it is an opt-out program, so it is faster to implement many such programs within the community, and it is kind of twice the speed and more of the digital engagement to the consumers. So it's like more utility is making the consumer more engaged in digitally and making them aware. They are more energy aware, they're more energy literate, and of course, at the end they are much more satisfied consumers at the end of the day. So that is how we work with the utilities, and yeah, that's what I wanted to share as of date for today. I'm open for any sorts of questions and which I can address to.
Yes, sir. We have a couple of questions for you. The first question for you is, how is it useful for the utility to gather real-time power usage information? And what will be the operational cost for 1 million meters?
So the first part of it, please, can you please repeat that? How it would be?
Useful for the utility to gather real-time power usage information.
Yeah, I mean, this is what we are talking about, with the smart meter data, where we are getting every 30 minutes of kind of data, how best we can utilize. And in this case, the utility is getting to know the consumer, its usage pattern. It can be a better load management, in a better forecasting, which will ultimately would be a better tool to have a better power purchase, where they need not to go for a costly power from the exchange from the day ahead trading. So if that can be from these data analytics can be used to sell off the peak load, that can be used for set, and also to know the customer better, and of course to have a program where the consumer can be a part of it. When we are talking about decarbonization goals, where we are talking about having, until unless the consumer is a part of it. And we have been talking about all the supply side management. Now it's time where we need to talk about demand side, and the consumer needs to be a partner in running a successful demand side management program. And these data would help to do that for utility and for the consumer. And on the cost part, it is actually very difficult to talk about. For the consumer, I'll tell you, it's a good question to ask. For the consumer, what we say, this is the line which we say. For the consumer, no price, no device. Few consumer might be very apprehensive if there is another parallel meter or appliances installed in their premises. So no, we don't install any hardware, any appliances so, and there is no price for the consumer. Of course, we are we work with the utility, and the benefits of course surpasses the cost what we render the service at. So for the consumer, there is no cost.
So we have another question. The question is, what happens to the consumer data when we switch to the other service provider or when subscription is ended?
Right. So it is like, the data, there is a data privacy there is an agreement, and Oracle, being Oracle, we are much more conscious about the data than that of utility is is the data owner, and that for all the handover takes place and it goes back to the utility. It isn't a server. And for us, like, Oracle doesn't keep any data with themselves. So that's kind of, that's not is the solution which we provide. Data kind of, management or data's usage is not our model, unlike maybe the Facebook or any other Google. So this is not like, our solution is more on to kind of, providing a utility solution. So that's how it is.
So there's another question. What are the risks in removing manual data entry?
I'm sorry, what are
the risks in removing manual data entry?
No, I mean, look, if we are talking about manually removing the manually, there would be a human error, which is kind of a possibility. That is one thing which is kind of, then real-time data. Now we are talking about, we want to communicate with the consumer, on a real-time basis. The smart meter data provides that platform. Why we want to, if we want to go for a manual thing, then the whole purpose of, making the meter smart is jeopardized. Like, I mean, that's how it is. So it has to be real time. So if for the real time, it is an automated thing which works faster, efficiently, without any human intervention, human error. So that's how I would kind of define.
All right. Well, I think good enough for now. We have some more questions which we will be forwarding it to you later. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It was a wonderful session.